The kayak roll is simply the most important skill you can learn in kayaking if you want to have a lot of fun in the sport. Once you can roll, the rapids look friendlier, they're easier, and they're not nearly as scary. Without a roll, the rapids look scary and you can get discouraged easily. Tipping over can actually be fun and exciting with a confident roll. Without one, it's not. So the roll is not that difficult, so let's go ahead and get to it. For you to learn the roll today, you're going to learn 4 phases of the roll. We're going to start with phase 1. Now phase 1 is the most important, and it's called the hip snap. The hip snap is simply this. It's you taking your boat from upside down to right side up. Simple as that. It's the one part of the roll that causes your boat to upright. Now what is the hip snap? The hip snap is simply using your hips and your knees to take the boat from there to here. It looks like this. Okay? It's not technically hard. However, just like with the brace, it's anti-intuitive. When you're upside down in a kayak, what is the first thing you're thinking of? I want to get out of the water. I want my head out of the water. Well, we're going to learn that the first thing that you want to think of is to turn the boat right side up. Now, the cool thing about the hip snap is when you do the hip snap, your boat finishes right side up and your body will finish in that bracing position, down and back. So that's phase 1, the hip snap. Let's look at how to practice it. The best way to practice the hip snap is to simply grab the side of the swimming pool, the side of the river, a rock, or even a partner's boat. You want to put your head on top of whatever it is that's supporting you, let the boat flop on top of you, and roll it off of you. Now remember, go into that brace position each time. Now your goal is to get snappier and snappier. Initially you're just looking for that motion to roll the boat right side up. Now you're doing a good hip snap when you've completely uprighted the boat and had your head and body all the way back. Most people, when they practice the hip snap initially, do a push-up. They try to push their head and body up instead of keeping their head and body stationary while snapping the boat. So, to review, keep your head and body stationary, snap the boat as fast as you can, make sure your head and body are back in that brace position when you finish. Okay, you now know how to practice the hip snap. The most important thing for you to remember is that the hip snap is the most important part of the roll. It's the part of the roll that makes your boat go right side up. Once you've practiced that, you're ready for phase 2. Phase 2 is simply practicing your hip snap, but now instead of using your hands on a solid object, you're going to put your hands on your paddle, and you're going to put your paddle on a solid object. Now lean over to the side, and let your boat flop on top of you. Once your boat's on top of you, simply hip snap off of you. It should feel exactly like phase 1. Now there's a few key elements that need to work in order for this to work for you. Number 1, the paddle has to stay perpendicular to your boat. Number 2, you need to come up in that brace position, the head all the way down and back. And lastly, what do you do with your top hand? You're going to notice when you tip over, your top hand's going to rub against your boat. You do not want to pull down on your top hand. Now if you're tipping over on the right, your top hand is your left hand. You want to make sure that your left hand is not pulling the paddle down against the boat. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time freeing the boat up for the hip snap. So lift that left hand off the boat slightly to release that pressure. You should find that the hip snap in phase 2 is super easy. When the hip snap does become super easy for you in phase 2, you're ready to do your first roll. Now your first roll is going to be done using your phase 2 technique. The only difference is you're not going to have your paddle on a solid object anymore. This time your paddle's going to be right against the water. Just you, the water, and the boat. You're doing your first roll. Okay, get in that phase 2 position. Paddle's perpendicular to the boat, just like when you brace. Keep the paddle over the water. Now let your boat tip over, splash in the water, let your boat flop on top of you, hip snap off of you. If you keep your head down and you go back into that brace position, you should roll up just like that. If you don't roll up just like that, you've lifted your head and you didn't do a proper hip snap. Now here's a couple key elements. Number 1, your paddle's no longer on a solid object, is it? Now what that means is it will sink in the water if you apply pressure on it as you're going in. So when you tip over, how do you want to tip over? Just like when you're bracing, you want to flop in fast. So don't pull down on the paddle until you've flopped in the water. Otherwise, your paddle's going to sink on you. If you keep your paddle out of the water and when you tip over and do a good hip snap, you're going to be up. Congratulations, you just did your first roll. Now obviously, when you tip over in a river, you're not going to be all set up and ready to go like this. So we're going to have to teach you phase 3. The objective of phase 3 is just to give you a home base that you can memorize that allows you a starting position to start with your paddle. From that home base, it should be really easy to get into the roll position. Now, what is the roll position? That's the position that you're sitting in phase 2, okay? All we need to do is learn how to get to that home base. All right, home base. Take your paddle, set it off to the left side of your boat. With your right hand forward, your left hand back, your paddle should be parallel to the boat. Your paddle blade should face straight up to the sky. That's your home base. Practice that a few times. Now try it with your eyes closed. You should be able to get to that home base easily. Okay, once you can do that, your next step is to start from home base and go back to your phase 2 position. Now how do you do that? You simply take your right hand and lift it straight up over your head. Right hand straight over your head. Now if you do it correctly, your right hand should be directly over your left hand. Does this paddle position feel familiar? It should. This is the phase 2 position that you just rolled up in. Let's try this a few times. Okay, now you can get up into the phase 3 position. Now I want you to look up at the top blade. The top blade should be pointed in such a way that the spoon part of the blade faces straight over the right side of your boat. You need to make sure that you can get to that position. Let's go ahead and practice that a few times with your eyes closed. Once you can go from home base to straight up with the blade facing the right way with your eyes shut, you're ready to try this in the water. But before you do a roll, you need to understand that you only have so much random access memory in your brain. Now what does that mean? It means you can only think of a couple things at one time. Doing the roll is like one of these, all right? You have to do several things at once, but we're going to make it a little bit easier. The way I want you to do the roll is I want you to go step by step when you're underwater. So what's the first step? The first step is before you even tip over, make sure you're in home base. Now you're upside down. What are you going to do? Step 1, cock your paddle straight up into the roll position. Step 2, head down and hips. That's all you need to think of. If you think of those 2 things in that order, you can do it. All right, go ahead and try it. Set up into home base. Tip over. Cock up, head down and hips. Bingo, you just did a roll. Awesome. You're ready for phase 4. Phase 4 is simply getting you ready for the river, getting you ready for your combat roll. A combat roll is nothing other than tipping over completely unexpectedly, being underwater in any random position with your paddle, and being able to go from that position to set up and roll. Guess what? Super easy. All you have to remember is this. From wherever you are, be able to get to home base. So how do you figure that out? Well, guess what? Underwater and right side up is the same. What I want you to do is practice getting to home base. Okay, now practice getting to home base with your eyes closed. All right, let go with one hand of your paddle. Now grab your paddle with your eyes closed, go to home base. A few of these drills, practicing from every conceivable position when you're right side up is what you need. Okay, you've practiced that. Let's try it upside down. Let's start with the easiest possible way. What I want you to do is I want you to hold the paddle over your head. I want you to tip over to the right. When you splash in the water, simply go to home base and roll up. The next couple minutes in this video, you're going to see a whole wide variety of different ways that you can tip over and set up. Basically, there's not a single situation that you should encounter in the river that you haven't practiced with in the pool or in flat water first. So make sure you try all these, and don't forget to enjoy the music.